minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Paul Duren, who has had a pretty cool accomplishment as of late. Not only did he hatch out a clutch of southern scrub pythons, but he maternally incubated them, something that has been done very few times historically, and of the times where it has, definitely not documented to the extent that Paul has. So I'm very excited to talk to him about it. But before we get started, as always, USARC. For those of you who are not aware, USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to pursue this means of life. Check out usarc.org for all of the information you need to know about USARC. And if you are not already a member, please look into becoming a member of USARC. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and the more people we have behind the cause, the better. Tonight, we are brought to you by Texas Chondros. Mark Hager, one of my favorite people here in the great state of Texas, and one of the top designer green tree python breeders in the country. If you are in that market for designer green tree pythons, check out Texas Chondros. He also runs the Texas Chondros Instagram page, which not only shows off animals of his, but of green tree python keepers from all over the great state of Texas. Once again, check out Texas Chondros. We're also brought to you by Mark Bailey Reptiles. Mark Bailey is one of the OGs of the reptile game. He has been leading the charge in the ball python industry before many of us knew what a ball python was. If you are a ball python fan, please check out Mark Bailey Reptiles for some of the best stuff on the market today. And we're also brought to you by Blake's Exotic Feeders. For anybody who is here in the United States and is looking for feeder quail to feed to their reptiles, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. They hand raise everything in their facility here in the United States, so you know you're getting a high quality product from a good US based source. Again, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. Here we are. Crazy busy week, but I am glad to finally be able to chill out, sit down, and have a fun conversation about scrub pythons, something that I am always up for. Shout out to everybody who is in the live chat already. And thank you to everybody who is listening after the fact. If you were here on YouTube, please hit that subscribe. Check out all the other shows here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. And if you are an audio person, whether that be Spotify or Apple or wherever you may enjoy your audio podcasts, give us a subscribe, a 5-star review, all that good stuff. Without further ado, let's get Paul on the show. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
It's going great, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Well, thank you for taking the time tonight. I'm very excited to dive into this conversation with you. I don't think there's anybody else who I could have this conversation with. So it's definitely a one-of-one type of thing going on right now.
Oh, I'm super excited.
Sweet. So for everybody who is watching and listening who isn't familiar with you, give us all a little bit of a rundown of your life and times in the reptile industry and kind of what led you to the point of working with scrub pythons?
Sure. I'm kind of a noob. I mean, I'm old, but I haven't really. I'm just a keeper. I'm not a breeder. This is the first.
Oh, you are.
Clutch of,
get that out of the way.
This is the first clutch of anything I've ever bred.
That's incredible. You started at the top. That's
yeah. Just go big or go home. No, I mean, so I've been keeping snakes for like 6 years ago. My kid started being the kid in his high school class who brought home the biology classes garter snakes for the summer, and and it became a shared passion between him and me. And I guess maybe about 4 years ago, I bought my first snake, which was a Mexican pine, Janai.
Great choice.
He's a total sweetheart. And now, I mean, I only have the 4 snakes. I've got the Janai down below, Super Dwarf free tick here, and then the 2 scrubs over here. I don't really have, I mean, if I had my way about it, I'd have a couple more snakes, but I don't really have any aspirations to have like a giant collection or to be producing at a certain level or anything like that at all. It's just about enjoying the snakes that I have and really kind of going deep with them.
Sure.
As much as I can.
Yeah, that definitely, I mean, that's a mindset that very few people have, but I think would suit a lot of people who, want to, immerse themselves in herpiculture.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's super rewarding, right? Like, I mean, if you can observe them really closely, there's so many interesting things to see and wonder about and scratch your head at, and little problems to solve and optimization. And it's been really, really fun. And you pretty quickly find out that you start learning one thing and it's attached to everything else in the universe, right? So
Oh, absolutely. So as we can see, your enclosures right behind you, they're pretty elaborate setups. Was that something that you had kind of had your mind on right away when you were first getting into keeping, of like, I want to have big kind of zoo style setups for your snakes?
I don't think it. No, not really necessarily. If it, like, at first I thought, oh, okay, we'll just buy some 36-inch Exoterras, and that's sort of what you do as a pet keeper. And then as I started learning more about what some people were doing, and okay, that seems pretty cool, and I'm not going to have that many animals, so I have the space for it, and then as I figured out more about like what kinds of snakes were interesting to me, and like these more sort of medium-sized, semi-arboreal, or medium-large size snakes that I think actually really benefit from having a lot of elbow room, despite not having elbows. It sort of came out of that, out of actually watching them and figuring out like, okay, how can I best provide for them?
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, that's something that I feel like a lot of, again, to harp on kind of the new keeper thing, I feel like a lot of times people, when they're starting out, and I did the same, it makes sense that you kind of look to the examples that are around you for that kind of guidance instead of observing what's right in front of you and drawing conclusions based off of that. And, that probably, for better or worse, is a product of getting into keeping reptiles, older than most do. When I was 8-9 years old when I first started, so
right.
My critical thinking wasn't quite as evolved. But with that said, though, I think a lot of people that don't have that confidence to trust their own observations when they're new to keeping snakes. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, no, totally. I mean, oh my God, all the questions that I peppered people with when I first got them, now it's a little bit cringy, with like, oh my gosh, I was asking people about this or that. But I have to say, I mean, there's pockets of drama in the reptile keeping community, but by and large, it's not that hard to find positive, thoughtful, reflective people who provide, actual information, right? I mean, like, you're a perfect example of that. Or like, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. The NPR guys have been a real resource for that. A bunch of other folks as well. So if you're interested in really going deep with it, there's plenty of people who are going to be very happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's gotten better over the last few years. I think with kind of the social media age and podcasting and whatnot, people kind of let their guard down a little bit because I think for a couple of reasons, but I think from just like a business standpoint, it benefits you to be out in the open, be visible, be, talking on podcasts and whatnot, or
Yeah.
making videos where, 15 years ago, if you had the secret to breeding jungle carpet pythons, no one else could breed
Sure.
jungle carpets, and you sell out immediately, you have a waiting list, you have the incentive to not tell anyone how to breed those jungle carpets. But now that the hobby is a little bit more evolved and it's grown just as far as numbers wise of people who are keeping and breeding so much, you kind of can't really be that one guy anymore unless you're in a super niche little area. So which I think obviously is definitely a positive in the long run, but I think these days for a new person, it's probably the easiest it's ever been to access real high quality information from qualified people.
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful that I came of age, as it were, now rather than 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know, I probably would have found a lot of the gatekeeping pretty off-putting and maybe not stuck around. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and I've brought it up a couple times on other episodes, but particularly with scrub pythons, that was a big problem up until probably the last few years, where even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you were a new keeper or not even a keeper yet, someone who was just interested, and you were kind of, watching some discussions, or you want to put your 2 cents here or a question here, and you get just shot down and belittled, you're probably going to be like, well, I'll find something else.
Right, exactly.
Even if that's what fascinates you, it's like a big part. I mean, I would say over 50% of the enjoyment of doing this is the camaraderie in the community.
I've made a ton of like really close friends.
Yeah.
This
is my social circle. Right. I don't have any friends outside of reptile industry. So, but yeah, I mean, it's such an important aspect of this. And if you're not nurturing that community around you, and even on a much smaller level, if you're not being nice to people, you're limiting where you can go, or what your potential for growth is nothing.
Yeah. And life is short and learning is fun, right? So there you go.
I'm gonna steal that quote. That's a great quote. Yeah. Very, very true. Never a more true statement I've heard. Yeah, absolutely. So what, actually, before I get into it, I want to touch on your first snake, the Mexican pine snake. That's a very atypical first snake, but I think one of the absolute best choices for a first snake. Why a Mexican pine snake?
It's a little bit of a quirky reason. When I first started thinking about what do I want to get, I thought I would like to get snakes from places that I've been that were important to me, or that I really enjoyed going, or that that perhaps I'd seen in the wild. So I'd done a backpacking trip in Mexico in the late '80s, and had pictures of me holding what I thought was a depii. Turns out it was a snoring gopher, but I didn't know that. And so I started researching depii, and then everything I found out about them, I was like, oh yeah, these are super cool snakes, and they seem like they'd be a really great first snake. My only complaint with him is he's not he's pretty shy. I don't see him all that often, although now that he's getting a few years on him, he's out a lot more. But I feel like first of all, anybody you show him to is like, holy crap, that's an amazing snake. And you could put him in a 2-year-old's hands, and I mean, I wouldn't do that because the snake could get hurt, but like, I don't know if you could make him bite anybody. I mean, has that been pretty much your experience with them?
Oh yeah, they're the best. I want to at least say that's probably the best reason I've ever heard for someone getting their first snake. Like,
Misidentifying something that they had herped.
well, no, but like I want to keep snakes, but I want to experience something that I had seen in the wild and that I have a memory associated with. That's a tremendous reason, because most of the reason is this YouTuber said this is the one to get. It's a pretty shallow reason.
Yeah.
One backpacking trip in Mexico where I came across this snake. That's a pretty awesome reason.
And the snake that I found was super chill, actually, just like and I just I have this great picture of me with much darker hair holding the snake, and it's great.
Yeah, I follow a number of Mexican keepers, field herpers, and it seems like they find them with more regularity down there than a lot of the pituophis exist up here in the U.S. that have kind of been pushed out of their habitat and hunted and yada yada. And it always seems that these snakes are just perfectly placid right there in the wild. Yeah, I mean, with bull snakes in particular, but I think the U.S. pituophis have a little more of that defensive posturing and whatnot.
Yep.
And typically that's mostly just a show, but the Mexican species don't really seem to do that nearly as much, and especially in a captive setting. I mean, even like the babies that I produce, they're just, you just open their tub up and you just pick them up and like, cool. So
hello.
Yeah, I mean, I always, and I, to sound like a broken record, but and not only because I keep them and I love them, I do truly think they're one of the absolute best pet snakes in the entire world. I mean, they're naturally beautiful. You don't need a morph for that snake to be mind-blowingly beautiful. They're not nearly as big as the U.S. pituophis. They're corn snake size essentially. A little bit bigger, a little bit thicker body, but not by a whole lot. I've seen some massive corn snakes. And they're big enough when they're babies to eat a fuzzy mouse. They don't ever not eat. You're not gonna have a ball python go off of food for 6 months on you, or a baby corn snake that needs like a day-old pinky that it's sometimes hard for some people to source. And if you do, you don't want to buy a bag of 100 of them or whatever you'd need to. To me, they're just like the perfect snake wrapped all.
Their keeping parameters couldn't be easier.
Yeah.
Right.
You could, just for keeping sake, you can keep them a million different ways. Keep them on ambient temperature in an apartment, or like.
Yep.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, well, that's awesome. So what was it? The scrub next or the retic next?
The retic. Yep.
Okay. And then, so what caught your eye with the retics?
Oh, some YouTuber told me they were cool.
We call it callback, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that pretty much is. That's an oversimplification, but no, I mean they. I have some friends who have them, and they were getting a lot of press at the time. They were super popular and kind of hard to get, but mostly just from meeting my friends' snakes and seeing like, oh, okay, I like this. It's more active than my Janai. I really like how climby they are. They're pretty interactive. Again, gorgeous. But in this case, it was more that I wanted something that was a little bit bigger, and I like their behavior a little bit better. And I just got a wild type. I'm not a morph. I mean, just sort of philosophically, I'm not a morph guy. So I just got a wild type Kalatoa, and he's been fantastic. Yeah. Another like fantastic pet snake. Just a little bit harder to keep. The keeping parameters, I think, are more difficult, but
compared to
in terms of compared to a Janai, right? But he's fantastic. And again, for like, as from the keeper, not breeder perspective, I think in terms of like what people are looking for in a pet snake, I think they've really got a lot to offer.
They do, 100%.
So
yeah, especially if you know that your lineage is legitimate. Then that's an issue that has kind of stifled the retic, the super dwarf retic community. But with that said, there's a lot of people who do take that very seriously, and yeah, absolutely, those snakes are they are really what they are. They come as advertised, you know, in many respects. They're interactive. They're, you know, they display well. They're good pet snakes. They're, you know.
Yeah. So you can see him right there.
Sure can. he's doing great stuff.
That's him being a show off.
Yep. Did the scrub python interest kind of come from retics, given that they're kind of similar, or was that something you had always had an interest in?
Well, it wasn't something I'd always had an interest in because I wasn't familiar with them. Like I've heard of reticulated pythons like since I was a kid, right?
Sure.
People, if you're into nature and stuff like that, you know, you sort of know what they are. At least you've heard those words together. But as I started learning more about different python types from you know, Australia and Indonesia and that whole area. I was like, oh man, there's so many cool ones. You know, all the different Morelia, I think are pretty amazing. And I think I got exposed to them more from educating myself more about Morelia. And then I was like, oh, there's carpet pythons, but oh, look at those. Those are metal. Like so, and it was definitely not something I had seen in the wild or anything like that. But it was more just like I really liked. There's just something about it, like the body plan of them. You know, how they're super muscular, but they're thin. They're long, but they don't weigh anything. They're smart. And I mean, I guess I would say, like, I have to own the fact that there was a little bit of the attraction of like, oh, this is the snake keeper snake. You know, this is like badge of honor to have this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I try not to make a decision based on that. But you know, sort of initially there was that appeal to it. But then I went and met a few of them. And in person, as I was researching, you know, is this something that I'm interested in actually taking on or not?
Yeah.
Because the reputation that you still hear about them all the time.
Yeah.
And the first ones that I met were actually kind of like that. They were but they were like kept in these really small enclosures or tubs, and I don't know, their temperament might have been like that anyway.
Sure.
But the first ones I met, I was like, okay, yep, they're super pretty, but I don't know, I wouldn't want to sign up for that, you know, just like striking the glass and and I don't know, I mean, I guess this is sort of getting ahead of myself in the conversation, but it's something that I always wonder about. Like, it was a big part for me of why I wanted to give these guys huge cages, because I feel like you put a giant snake or a really big snake, especially one that's arboreal, that is a little bit shy or, you know, has a sense of its own territory. You put it in a small box where they can't get away, and that's going to be hard on them, right? Maybe not every single time, but a lot of times.
I think once they reach a point too, I think for a wild caught scrub, I think they have this turning point where they're established, they're settled in, where I think prior to that, if you have them in too much of an exposed setup, that'll have a negative impact. But then they hit that point where they're confident. So then that confinement goes from what help them to now like a bit of like a hindrance. If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And in this case, these were captive bred, but and I know there's a variety of temperament and everything, but
yes.
But anyway, so I went and I just go back to your original question. So I went and met those, and then I actually I met you at Tinley. I don't know if you recall, but you were super generous with your time, and you had I think 3 or 4 year old patternless, I think Southern girl.
Yep.
And I got to meet her, and I was like, oh, okay, yep, this is the experience that I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Do you still have her?
I don't. A good friend of mine has her now, but I have a sister of hers who,
yeah,
I hope she's going this year. They're plenty old enough now, so.
Yeah. And do I remember correctly? Was that a Southern?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it was a F2
yep.
captive bred Southern.
Oh wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was it. And it was just a question of like, okay, am I, where am I going to find these? What am I, where am I going to get them from? And then just sort of out of the blue, these two came available. Dan Mallory had imported them farm hatched in 2017,
okay.
and sold them to a gentleman who had them for 6 years, I guess, and then sold them back to Dan.
Okay.
And Dan had them for, I think, 6-ish months, and then I bought them.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when that big group came in back around that time.
Yeah.
There was, Dan brought a number of them over, and it's cool to see those animals producing now. It's very cool to see.
Yeah. Yep. I think the ones that Ryan just got, I think, are also from that shipment.
Yeah. Ryan, and then I have another friend
and Christian too, maybe.
That I don't know, but could very well be. His animals are very similar. I have another friend who is having some success with those. I'm not sure if he wants to speak on it or not, so I'll let him do that on his turn. But
sure.
But yeah, I mean, a number of those snakes have, not only do they thrive, they're now to the point where they're producing, and it's really cool to see, because so often you see, and you see imports come in, and you're like, oh, that's cool, but will we see that animal in 4 years or 6 years? And to not only see those animals, but see the offspring of those animals, it's pretty special.
Mm-hmm. That is cool. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, because I think he brought in like 20 of them or something like that.
Oh, at least. Yeah, it was a sizable group. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So how long ago did you acquire those animals?
I got them in October.
Okay. So pretty quick turnaround there, huh?
Yeah. So they had been in the gentleman who had them in a stack of 4x2 Neodeshes.
Okay.
He had 4 of them, and he put them together occasionally, and they had locks, but no reproduction. And then Dan had the same experience. While he had them, he mostly kept them separate, but sometimes would throw them together, and he'd also see some locks, but also no reproduction. But they've basically grown up together. So yeah. I don't know if they're related or not, but they've been together their whole lives.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. So you got them in October, and kind of what was your process of getting them settled into your house, and did they go right into the enclosure? Did you have them somewhere temporary to start?
No, I had them in a quarantine separate room in separate part of the house for 4 months, and pretty much left them alone, with a couple of caveats. I didn't try to handle them very much. Well, I didn't try to handle them at all, really. if I had to move them, I would pick up I'd have them in a hide that had a bottom and pick up the hide, and they were fine with that. That didn't bother them. They were pretty chill with that. But they were in just 4x2, just regular PVC 4x2x2s, which I felt was I wasn't entirely that wasn't. I knew that wasn't the direction I was going to go with them, so I wanted to kind of get them a little bit more acclimated to how I was going to be keeping them. So they were in a snake-proof room, but they were given an opportunity to for time out of the cage and roaming in the room from time to time. So, which they love. They are really into that.
I know. I've had that happen unintentionally, and I can say,
yeah, they love it. So we did that for 4 months and 4-ish months, while I just sort of waited for quarantine and nido testing and all of that stuff, and while I was building these enclosures, and then once these were ready to go and I felt comfortable moving them into the room, then I brought them in here.
Cool. So then you got them in October with a 4-month period. I mean, you're in the heart of breeding season by the time you're even putting the snakes into their final enclosures.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't think that they were going to breed.
Yeah,
I figured, like, well, geez, I just moved them from San Diego to Seattle. And they're just in this completely different environment. The weather is different. The day-night cycle is different. Everything is totally different. So there's no way they're going to breed. But I really think that part of it is that they came to me in really good body condition.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's not something I did. That's just how they came to me. And then I remember Dan saying one time, like, yeah, breeders like to take credit for their snakes liking each other. but if you put snakes together that like each other, that's a big part of the what your job is as a breeder.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if that seems glib or.
No, I think that's a very true statement. I mean, the first step of any breeding is compatibility between the animals, and sometimes it is just not there. I think there are certain species that are much more prone to that dynamic than others, and I don't think scrub pythons are one of those that are overly prone to it. But with that said, some males aren't quite as willing of breeders, and some females are a bit more defensive. So there's factors that go into it for sure. So having a compatible pair is a huge first step in the process, and then introducing them at the right time, and reading your animals to know when if the female is overly food excited all the time, that introduction might be a little shakier than if she isn't, or like that.
Yep.
So,
I think in this case, when I look back on it, even though I was putting them together more to just see how they would do together, and I figured, okay, well, if they breed, that'll be cool, but I don't anticipate it happening. But I think in looking back in retrospect about what I did and what their story arc was coming into the season, like I said, they came to me in good body condition. I allowed particularly the male to roam a fair amount during the run up to breeding season. Okay. And he really wanted to do that. So she wasn't as interested in it, but he's like cruising all over the place.
Sure.
And which I think perhaps mirrors more of their natural history. And then I stuck them in these enclosures, and these, as much as I tried to keep their humidity at a higher level in the 4x2s. I was never totally happy with it, but these things have misters that are controlled by a humidistat, and so basically they got the wet season when they came in here.
Sure.
And and so and when I move an animal, I like to feed them pretty quickly to give them the idea that, okay, I'm in a new place and there's food here.
Yeah.
So basically within a couple of days of moving here, higher humidity, a bunch of food, and I can't say for sure that that pushed them over the edge, but pretty quickly within less than a week of moving into these enclosures, they were locked up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that lines up perfectly with what you would expect. That kind of stimulus shift and then food plus an environmental shift. That'll do it, especially for animals that are ready to go. When you start seeing your male cruising around heavily like that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the first thing, the first part of that question.
When did you first start seeing your male kind of ramp up?
Like the month before, like in January. He was more interested in it.
So this was out of the enclosure as well, kind of going all over?
Yep.
Would he ever like fixate on an area where the female had been or around her enclosure or anything like that?
Not that I could tell particularly, no.
Okay.
No. He, like, you could tell once he was interested in her, that was a different type of behavior for him, for sure.
Got it.
But I think just the general roaminess, I think that's just sort of who he is in general, personality wise. So the fact that I was letting him do that, like we said, he likes doing it. So even if it's not related to breeding, it's nice to be able to allow him to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the size of those enclosures?
They are 7 wide, just under 3 feet deep and 3.5 feet tall. So, and then there's a pass through between the two of them. So it's basically a 7 by 3 by 7.
Okay.
It's subdivided.
Yeah, that's a pretty phenomenal enclosure for them. So right now, given that it's off season, do you have that pass through closed off?
It's closed. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And now Bobby, the female, is really hungry. So I wouldn't be so anxious to put them together right now, because Amos is like Mr. Chill, and Bobby's like, hey, what's going on? So yeah, I'm not putting them together at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely a tad bit early for that. So I kind of want to start going through some of your pictures that you were nice enough to give me. I put them in kind of in the order. So this image right here, for anyone who's listening only, you are missing out on cool pictures of scrub pythons. So what stage of the game was this where it appears that she's kind of darkening up a bit?
Yeah, so that's maybe like halfway between ovulation and laying.
Okay.
And so she was basking a lot during that time. That was part of why I took that picture. So there's so each of their enclosures has a large basking shelf in them, and that's what she's on right there. And there's basking lights above that, and then underneath that there's radiant heat panels, and the radiant heat panels just provide the ambient in the enclosure, mostly at night, and then during the day the heat is basically from the basking. But she would go up there almost every day while she was gravid, and she would bask. She would get herself to 99 degrees on a temp gun.
Okay. Yeah, that's not too surprising to me. The more time goes on, the more I think that these snakes really will cook at a fairly high temperature just for more limited periods than we may see at a lower temperature. So so you said this was between ovulation and the prelay shed, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yeah. I'm
Or
pretty sure that is, yeah, like halfway through being gravid.
okay. So maybe a little
I
bit of
think.
that. So this is probably a better place to start.
Yes.
So how many
Yeah.
copulations did you witness between the two of them?
It they were locking off and on over the course of 3 weeks, and they would
Okay.
go at it off and on for like a day or so, and then just sort of retire, or she'd be like, okay, I'm done, and then he would just sort of be right close to her but not touching her, and he would just sort of stare at her. and she would ignore him.
Oh, been there. Wait, what? Okay.
Yeah, it reminded. Yeah. Uh, it was wild. He was I mean, you can see how much larger she is than him, right? They're the same length, and she's double his weight almost.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. Do you think that was just a function of the previous owners?
I assume so. Yeah.
Email. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know you've talked about being able to tell their gender by their head shape and stuff, but is this what you would expect? Because he's got the way more narrow head, and she's got the great big wide arrowhead shaped head.
Yeah, I mean, from just the head standpoint, yes, I would kind of go the opposite. But then to me, then it's head shape coupled with the back third and tail.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she has a pretty thick, round back third of her body, which is pretty typical for a female. Where you can, that male, despite being that same length, you can't look at the back third of his body and imagine an egg in there. It would look like he swallowed a tennis ball.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, I've had some males with smaller heads proportionally as well.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's not a foolproof indicator, and I think it's just for me one of my like little projects of trying to like force myself to be better at all of this scrub python stuff. But it definitely does hold true in a lot of instances. Yeah, it's very cool to see. So let's see. So this I assume is pretty early on, considering that she's still fairly light in coloration, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Would this have been kind of around that February time?
That's I would guess that's, yeah. So that's probably before before the prelay shed.
Okay.
And that was typical behavior, right? She'd just be getting herself warmed up, and he would just be like right next to her but not touching her, and just gazing at her longingly.
Yep, absolutely. So what was their or I guess particularly her kind of feeding like in terms of her development? Did she, so you said that she, or I guess now, okay, last year, did she have a period of a noticeably increased feeding response kind of prior to going through the follicular development process?
She did not.
Okay.
Yeah, not particularly. I was just sort of feeding her sort of what I would consider kind of maintenance feeding. I wasn't trying to do any cycling whatsoever.
Sure.
And then I guess maybe once they started actually mating, then I was like, oh, okay, it's on. And I remember I was chatting with you a little bit, and you were like, yeah, no, feed her. So I gave her a few a bit more meals closer together than I would normally. But it wasn't like I wasn't hitting her super hard or anything, and it wasn't like she was completely nutso, but she was definitely happy to eat.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, to me, it just, what if they're not refusing food, they want the calories.
Yep.
And especially if prior to that breeding event, she doesn't have excess or too much excess weight on her, because they need a little bit, obviously. But then those extra calories, in my eyes at least, they're just going directly to follicular development.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that's where some people have kind of fallen short, and I think in kind of past attempts where I've fallen short is not providing that female with enough nutrition later on in the process, where they're developing follicles, you're getting copulations, the female's still eating, but you're potentially still either maintenance feeding her or holding back a little bit because you think you should at this point. And then you get your snake goes into shed, you think it's a prelay shed, it sheds out and it's brighter than it's ever been, and you're like, well, something doesn't seem right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that has to do with later on not giving them quite enough food. So yeah, I mean, it seemed to me that every step of the way she was doing what she needed to. And you were providing.
That's the theme of this whole episode.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that coupled with you providing what she needed at that time, because you could have just as easily, been like, nope, I know better than my snake, and you're not getting this or that, and then, she reabsorbs.
No, so that is totally my philosophy, like, from this entire thing, is try and, just like you're saying, pay close attention and try and figure out what it is they want, and then give them as many options as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to be right every single time, right? Like, if you give them options, they'll do the thing that they want to do.
Definitely.
So
yeah.
But yeah, it was super helpful that at that stage and things, that you were encouraging me to keep feeding her, because I don't know that I would have quite as much as I did.
Well, I'm glad it worked out, because this is pretty awesome. So looking here at these enclosures, I assume female on the top, male on the bottom, or
Yep.
is it the other way around?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So how do you have, now that we're actually looking at it in full view, the lighting and heating schemes, what are kind of the details of that, and on-off cycles,
Sure.
proximity to the nest box, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So this picture was taken before the nest box was in the upper cage.
Okay.
The nest box eventually went on the far right of the upper cage there.
Okay.
So, like I said, they each have a basking shelf that has the heat panels underneath it that are that keep the shelf warm at night and keep the entire enclosure, from getting down to the ambient in my room, which would be too cold for them. And then they each have the basket. My ambient in my room might get down to like 70, 72.
Okay.
And so I'm dropping them just down to like 78 at night, something like that.
And what was the daytime ambient in the enclosure?
Get up into the low 80s with the and that was the ambient in the enclosure. That's one of the nice things about having a larger enclosure, is that the basking spot actually can be a basking spot that's significantly warmer than the rest of the enclosure.
Sure.
So it's way easier to do that in something like this than it is in a 4x2, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then so there's I don't vary the day-night cycle over the course of the year.
Okay.
Because they're basically equatorial.
Right.
What I do is the UVB and the full spectrum lights, which are on in those pictures. You can't see the fixtures because they're hidden, but
Sure.
or they're up in the hoods. But those don't come on every day, because I looked at Weather Spark, and the weather in West Papua, it's cloudy a lot of the time. So some days they don't come on at all. Some days they come on for 3 hours, and some days they come on for 6 or 7 hours.
Okay.
And so those vary during the course of the week.
When they are on, do you see the snakes actively seeking those spots where they could be in direct view of the lights?
It varies. It totally varies, and mostly not.
Yeah.
But then sometimes they do. So so I feel like, okay, well, it's worth having. And the UVB is only on in the area where the basking area is. So
Okay.
so if they get one, then they get the other.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then there's the like I said, so the question there, the enclosures. So yeah, like a 7 wide, just under 3 deep and 3.5 tall each.
Anyway, so what were you saying?
Yep. Just and you can't see the sprinkler system either, but all of that stuff is just controlled by the humidity sensor and with the herpstat.
And what percent do you have that set to?
It varies. During the day, it goes down to about 65, and at night, it's around 75. Okay. And there's the way I have it programmed, there's a little bit of a swing, so it goes up a little bit above 75, and it gets a little bit below 65. But that's basically what it's set at.
Okay, makes sense. Cool. So I don't want to get ahead of us, but since we're on the topic of the enclosure setup, at what point did you introduce the nest box?
A few weeks before I expected her to lay.
Okay.
And she was not very interested in it.
Yeah. Yeah. What ended up? Did you have to put her or get her in there and trap her in, kind of, or what? How did that go?
No. So I guess you can't see it in that picture, but each of those enclosures has a sky hide.
Okay.
Just like an upside down hide that's in the ceiling.
Can we see it? Well, either way, I'll take your word for it.
Okay. You're looking on the.
Yeah, I'm just looking on the live feed.
Oh, yeah, you can't really see it.
Right.
But yeah, there's a big sky hide. And before she laid, that was she liked to go. That she spent a lot of time there. So eventually, what I did was, you saw when we were looking at the enclosures, they were those Home Depot boxes with the yellow lids. I had tried to get her to go in that. Just by, when I say tried to make her go in it, I made it available to her, and it was just sitting on the floor of the cage, and she wasn't interested in it. So I took down her sky hide, and I put a PVC lid on it, so that you still had to go into it through a little hole.
Sure.
And I zip tied that to the top of the nest. So, and then I sort of propped it up a little bit off the ground. So it wasn't fully elevated all the way to the ceiling, but basically it was like, okay, here's your favorite tree hollow that you like to go in all the time.
Yeah.
Basically. And I left the sphagnum in there that had been in there all along and everything. And it took her a little while to figure it out, but when she figured out, this is my place, then she went in there, and then she started hanging out down in the nest. So basically, it was like a foyer. It wound up being a foyer to the nest.
Okay.
Which actually I think worked out well, because it prevented a direct line of sight into the nest, and I think made the nest feel extra secure. There wasn't just a hole on top. There was the holes were offset.
Okay.
So,
cool.
My theory, anyway, made it feel more secure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely something to that, and yeah, that was interesting. It was a good idea of the put the thing that she likes where you want her to go. Definitely makes a lot of sense. So I guess before we get into your actual nest box design itself, which I'm very interested to talk to you about, this picture right here, was this pre or post ovulation?
That is the ovulation.
It is the ovulation.
That's
All
the
right.
event.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that lasted for about 24 hours. I just came downstairs like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they can be
that was
tricky. So
wild.
it was cool that you were able to get a good look at it and know for sure that you knew what you were seeing. So
I
very
mean, I guess to the extent that you can know anything for sure,
sure.
but she didn't look anything like that the day before, and she didn't look
Yeah,
anything like that the day after. So that seemed like, okay, well, hopefully that's what that was.
yeah, that definitely that adds up. So from the point of the ovulation until her shed, how long was that? If you
Ooh,
have that
I
note
gotta
or if
look
you
that up.
remember roughly.
Um, doo, doo, doo. Um, Sorry, I take so many notes that it takes me a little while to actually go
No worries.
to go through all of them. Um, where is my ovulation? I'm sorry, I can't find it.
You're good.
It was, I think it was, at the time, I remember doing the math on it and thinking like, oh yeah, that's about what we expected. So
Yeah,
it wasn't anything. It wasn't a remarkable number particularly.
yeah.
Um,
Okay. And then from the shed until she laid, do you have that one?
let's see. She laid on May 17th,
Okay.
though. Um, and she shed on April 23rd.
Okay. So pretty standard issue.
Yeah. So just under like 3.5 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, makes sense. So once she was gestating, and I forget if we discussed this earlier, but we'll touch on it again. If not, what was her behavior pattern from like over the course of each day? Did you notice a significant change?
So after she had laid, yeah. So yeah, that freaked me out because the very first day she left the nest and went up and basked, and I was like, oh no, she's abandoning the eggs, like oh no. And of course, I mean, I knew that they sometimes do this, or that pythons do this.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't really have much of a um, record to go on of what scrubs might do,
Sure.
uh, but once, uh, but yeah, once she, after she, so after she laid, she left the nest every day for the first until the last month. Basically, she left the nest every day.
Wow.
Um, and the first month she would go out and she would really heat herself up,
Mhm.
and then the second month she did that. She would come out later in the day after the basking lights were off, and um, and so there was she was changing it up with her thermoregulation,
Yeah.
and then the last month she didn't leave the nest anymore.
Okay. Wow, that's super interesting. Um, did you get any temperature readings from inside the nest
I
during?
did, yeah. I had a Govee in there the whole time.
Okay.
So the Govee wasn't in the egg mass itself; it was just right next to it. But it's not a big nest, so she would be up against it.
Yeah.
And the average for um, over the entire time was 84.5 degrees, and it ranged from like 82.5 to sometimes she would take it up into like 88 plus when she would come back um, from
Yeah.
basking. But every day there was quite a bit of cycle actually.
Interesting. I mean that goes so against kind of the conventional
Right.
incubation wisdom that
Totally.
really cool to hear that. So let's see if this is So is this her just on the freshly laid clutch?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
That's her. Yeah, that's
So,
in like 10 days or so, something like that.
Okay. Oh, okay, cool, cool. So and you described to me the intricacy of the nest box.
Oh God.
You want to talk about, because that, yeah, I mean, I feel like the key to the success of the maternal incubation is making sure that she can maintain that environment.
Yep.
What was your thought process going into, okay, I'm considering maternal incubation. This is how I think the best nest box setup would go.
So, so my background is in home construction. So I'm used to thinking about things in terms of temperature and humidity control, which was actually a huge advantage in thinking about this stuff and made it a little bit more accessible. Like, oh, okay, well, you just have to manage it. And I was never really concerned about the temperature in the nest box, but I was really worried about desiccation of the eggs, right?
Yeah.
And again, this is like one of the main arguments that you hear for why you should use an incubator is because the eggs are going to dry out otherwise, or at least that's what I've heard. And so I wanted to make sure that I could keep the nest box as humid as possible. So initially, what I did with the nest box is I had not one tub but two tubs, and they were basically the tubs were nested together.
Okay.
The lower one had a warm water bath in it, and there were a million little holes in the bottom of the inner nest box. If that worked, like it, if you're familiar with like a double boiler, or like putting a colander in a mixing bowl. And so the idea was that, okay, I'm going to have this warm water underneath the nest box, and that was the temperature that was controlled by an aquarium heater, and I figured, okay, that's gonna provide a really even, steady heat, and it's going to provide lots of humidity.
Sure.
But after, I don't know, after a week or two, one time when she was off the eggs, I just cracked the nest open, and I saw like, oh my gosh, there's like a fair amount of mold on these eggs, and more than I was comfortable with. And again, like I didn't really have anything to compare it to. I know that happens in the wild to some extent, but like, is it too much? I don't know.
Right.
And so I pulled out the water bath part of it and just left the nest box in the corner of the enclosure and bumped up the humidity slightly, and that seemed to be fine. So yeah. The other little trick with the nest box that was fun was that camera that I had in there. Those Govee cameras, or not Govee, Wise cameras, they generate a fair amount of heat, and so I oh yeah, that's her, right? That's the day after she laid. Look how pretty those are.
Yeah, gorgeous eggs.
So basically, I had the Govee that was in there was talking to a smart plug that controlled the camera, and if the temperature in the nest box got too hot, the Govee would tell the plug on the camera to turn off, and it wouldn't come back on until the temperature had dropped a few degrees, and then the camera would come back on, and that was sort of a nice way to kind of do minor course corrections in the temperature of the nest box.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And so how long was it into the process when you decided to pull out the bottom tub?
I think just like 10 days, give or take. It was really early.
Okay. Makes sense. And then what did you bump that humidity up to ambient in the enclosure?
Generally around 70, something like that, 70, 75. I still did it higher at night. I started to get a little bit of condensation if I did it too high. So basically I bumped it as high as I could get it without getting condensation.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. Oh, wow. I just had a question.
Oh, and then I was going to say, like, so part of what gave me the faith to do that was seeing that she wasn't keeping those eggs wrapped super tightly all the time. I mean, like you had that one picture where she's beehived, right? And when she was wrapping those eggs, she's not just on them like a beehive. She's all the way around them. She's underneath them too. So,
that's
right.
still
So she would do like that picture that you've got there now.
Yeah.
She was doing that a lot.
Okay.
And so, and she's constant, like every hour or so, she would like unwrap a little bit and check the eggs. And, you know, we know that they are really sensitive, both temperature, or the moms are able to discern a lot with temperature and humidity with the eggs, as well as possibly oxygen level and so forth. So the fact that she was leaving them partially uncovered and she felt comfortable just freaking bailing on them for a couple of hours a day, it made me think, oh, I don't really need to be so worried about, you know,
Sure.
About whether or not I'm keeping this just as pinned as it possibly can be with humidity.
Sure.
Oh, and the other thing, another cool thing. So those eggs are all glued together, right?
Yeah.
She rotated that egg mass a lot.
Really?
A lot. This whole thing about you can't rotate eggs, total bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on her right now because yes. Yep. I took pictures every day for 2 months and I tried to like number them. In fact, I think I sent you 2 pictures with the with numbers on the eggs.
Yes. Okay. That's what those are for then. Okay. So
that's why I sent those. Yeah. So, I tried really hard to figure out like, okay, which one is number 1 and which one is number 6, but yeah.
No way.
So, way.
Whoa. That is cool.
Like how freaking cool. Like that's an important thing for people to know, right? That,
yeah.
Like this whole thing of, I don't know if you heard the interview with Dale DiNardo on NPR about python eggs, but he's a researcher and he talked about that a little bit. They asked him, does rotating eggs kill the embryos? And he just said, yeah, if you're a turtle, but for snakes, it's fine. And so that made me a little bit more relaxed about it. But yeah, she moved them a lot.
I think to me, the interesting thing is that she would do it intentionally.
Well, I can't say that it was intentional, but it was consistent.
Yeah.
And you know, and like I said, when she would crawl into the nest box every time, she would get herself kind of underneath them and she'd like squirm back and forth and get everything just exactly how it's supposed to be. So, and her entire job is like, she's paying attention to these eggs. Like that's all she's doing. Right. So yeah. I'm hesitant to say intent, but it's a really consistent behavior. So
yeah.
At the very least, I think I feel comfortable saying it didn't hurt them.
To me, it's just, if that was a potentially detrimental thing, which obviously it's not, then I would have full faith and confidence that mom would not,
right,
would not manipulate the position of the eggs. So the fact that she did, and with routine, I don't know what the utility would be, but I would be inclined to think it could be something.
So when I thought about it, I was like, okay, well, there's different microclimates within the nest, right? And this one is pretty user friendly for snakes, right? But if in the wild, if they're laying on a rock ledge or they're not always going to have ideal positions, it could make sense that that they want to make sure that everybody sort of gets an equal access to a limited resource, whether that's
so Scott,
it can be air,
that makes a lot of sense.
Humidity, heat, whatever it is. But yeah, exactly.
And I think that at least just with incubating artificially so many times, I've found, and then I have some friends who also have had the same observation, that if you have a decent pile like that with some verticality to it, that sometimes there's an egg like on the bottom, that egg will go bad in the process. So for the sake of what Scott said about the airflow, but then also what you were saying about just microclimate, humidity, that could, because the snakes aren't ripping all these eggs apart from each other and separating them out all nicely. But it makes a lot of sense. Like, why would this egg on the top have preferential airflow to this one down here or this one on the side? That definitely makes a lot of sense to me. Very interesting. Yeah,
Isn't that cool? I just thought that was awesome.
I've never heard that before, but it makes sense just thinking about it, but it would have never crossed my mind. So
right, it totally freaked me out when she first did it. I'm like, oh fuck, she just killed the whole clutch. But
yeah, I remember hearing about I think the Barkers with some ball python eggs a while back. Did an experiment where every day they just took the eggs and they just turned them upside down and turned them upside down, turned them upside down every single day, and then they all hatched.
Yep.
So, yeah, turtle eggs, one thing. Snake eggs, not a concern.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's super interesting. When she would leave the nest in that kind of first period during the day to bask, how long was she gone on average?
I would say an average of about an hour, but it varied between a half hour and 2 hours.
But pretty quick, pretty limited.
Yeah, and if I even, I mean, she's tolerating me walking by the enclosure, but like if I crack the door or something, boom, right back to the nest.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so her default was back to my eggs.
Totally. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, she wouldn't come towards me at all. She would just zoom back to the eggs. Wow. And then when she went back in there, her behavior with them was different than it was when she just went back in a non-agitated state.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, she's like checking all the doors and windows, right?
Yeah. Huh. Oh, that's so cool.
It's so cool.
So then you said kind of phase 2 was her moving around more at night, not necessarily during the day.
It wasn't at night. It would be in the afternoon after the lights were off,
or
after the basking lights were off. So it was still during the day, but it was basically when the enclosure was when she could go on the basking shelf and it was cooler. So
she would go to the shelf.
She would still go to the shelf. Oh. And the shelf would have had the basking lights on it, so there would be some residual heat. And remember those radiant heat panels underneath it. But it was a gentler heat that she was exposing herself to.
And was it a similar time frame?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. So she just knew that she was at that point where she didn't need as much heat to bring back the eggs. So she went at a different time.
Yep. It's so cool.
So cool.
It's so cool. And she and remember, she ate also. So she was yeah. So I was feeding the other snakes in the room a week after she laid, and she was up on the shelf, and she was like, "Really? Okay." So I thought her out a rat, and oh my God! Normally she's actually a little bit demure with her eating. She'll just come over and just sort of lightly smell it. And dude, I opened the enclosure. My son was holding the rat. Wham! Wham! And she just like, it was gone. There was none of this sniffing around. Where am I going to bite it? How am I going to hold it just right? And like, boom. And just booked it back to the nest. She got it down.
Okay, she
got it down. But she got it down. I timed it. I think she ate it in 90 seconds, where it normally takes her like 10 minutes.
What?
Yeah.
That's a colubrid.
Right. Yeah. Like, what are you, a garter snake?
Oh my gosh. This is incredible.
Yeah.
So did she like grab it and just wrap it, but immediately, or did she even wrap it?
She wrapped it a little bit. I don't know if she's ever been fed live, so it's not like she has a huge constricting
Sure.
behavior necessarily, but yeah, she constricted it, held it, and just started eating.
Wow.
Now it wasn't like a giant rat or anything. I think it was a small medium.
Okay.
Or so it wasn't like
So it was a
yeah.
rat you can take down quickly with the.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. But it was the kind of thing where normally before she was doing all this stuff, she would have taken much longer to eat it because
Sure.
that's just how she does.
Sure. Okay. Wow.
It was, dude, it was super fun. And then she basked a little bit more, for a day or two after that.
Okay.
While she was digesting, as you would expect, but it wasn't a huge difference.
What was her body condition like? Because you're seeing her out. Did she look like a deflated tire or?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was really glad that I had that I'd listened to a million podcasts where people had said, yeah, when I saw my girl after she laid, I was like, because that's definitely what she looked like an empty sock.
Yeah.
And super, super, super dark still, obviously.
Yep. Okay. So during the course of the incubation, how many times did you take food from you? And did she stop at any point?
She ate 3 times, and then during the last month when she didn't come out, I took that as a cue, like, okay, well, she's not hungry enough to.
Sure.
This isn't a drive for her now, so I'm not going to offer her anything during the last month.
Yeah. Did you increase that meal size in meal 2 and 3, or did you stay with a smaller item for her?
I stayed with like either a small medium or a medium. So like, I don't know, 150 grams or something.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Decent size. Did she do that same sort of like ravenous, take it down the other meals?
Yep. And then I was prepared. I had a second one. I had a second one ready for her, but she did not want it. Like she, like it was just that mindset of like, okay, I got it. Now I'm gone.
Sure.
And, like I have this video, it's hilarious, where I'm like literally sort of chasing her, reaching across the enclosure, but wait, you can have seconds. She's just cruising back to the nest.
That's funny. Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. I would assume that they would jump all over that opportunity, but
I think honestly, she was all about being a mom, right? Like that's, and she's, it made me really glad that I never tried to pull her off the eggs. One, because like, I think this is like really what she wanted to do. So I feel like it's just sort of in line with what I was trying to do with, being able to observe natural behaviors and all of that. But also just tactically trying to get her off of the egg. She would not have been into it. No, she was super, super, super attentive. And all the way through.
Yeah, no, that definitely. I mean, it takes some guts to do what you did, but you got. I mean, my experience was anxiously staring into an incubator 10 times a day for 90 days. Not nearly as fun as what you got to experience.
Dude, totally. I like that was one of my takeaways from this. I was talking with some other friends of mine afterwards. I'm like, man, traditional breeders are missing out because this is so much fun. It's freaking amazing. All the cool shit you see, like, and it's also super easy. Like I didn't have to do. I didn't do anything, right? Like I just set it up so that she could do it. And I just got to have fun. So
yeah, I mean, fair enough. That's I don't know what more you can really ask for. Let them do their thing and just enjoy yourself with it.
Yeah, no, I totally had a great time.
Wow. So what day did the first baby start pipping on? Do you have that number or roughly?
August 3rd. So I think that was 79 days. And I thought it would be longer because the average temperature was a little bit lower.
Yeah.
But she was basically right on time with kind of the average. But more cool observations. So with that camera in there, for the week before the baby started pipping, I started seeing her, like she would just jump and twitch in a different way than she had. She had been doing some of those twitches that people debate about whether or not it's thermogenesis.
Sure.
She had been doing some of that throughout the gestation or throughout the incubation, but the last week she started doing these totally different type of jumps, and doing it a lot. And it reminded me of before my son was born, and he would kick my wife in the ribs, or I'd just be sitting there with my wife, and she'd be like, "Oh!" So the read that I took from it was, okay, the only stimulus that she's getting in that box is from the eggs. She's reacting to something. So that started me thinking, like, okay, I don't know, something has changed. I don't know what the timeline is going to be, but
Sure.
something is changing. And then the day before they hatched, or the day before I first saw the first pips, Amos, the male down below, started cruising his cage like a maniac and looking in all of the little hides that he never doesn't care about at all. And he's searching all over his enclosure.
Wow.
In a way that was completely uncharacteristic of what he had done for the last 3 months. And he did it for that one day and then didn't do it anymore. That was the only day he did it, was when the baby started pipping.
No way.
So I mean, you and I had DM'd a little bit about male nest defense in Oenpelli pythons, right? I didn't see any other protective behavior on his part during the course of this, but that was just such a super distinct behavior.
Yeah.
At a really distinct time. I have a hard time not drawing a correlation between those two.
Yeah, that would be difficult not to, considering that it was this isolated moment, just happened to be when his babies were hatching. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to, like, throughout this conversation, like, bargain with myself of, like, if you have this many clutches next year, you're going to do it with this one. Because, I mean, it's just it's so cool. It almost then begs the question, what would it be like if you had a female maternally incubate and had the male in the enclosure the whole time?
That's what I would do next time, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. The gentleman, Gavin Bedford, who wrote that book about Oenpelli pythons, that's what he's been doing. And he's been, he hasn't done the maternal incubation part, but he's been leaving the male in with the females up until she lays. So are you getting some weird sounds?
I have some snakes that are rubbing on some. Oh, from your end or from mine?
Yeah. My audio is all
You know,
take out these AirPods.
Okay, that might do back in. Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. Paul, if you can unmute your mind. My sound is crazy. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Here,
I'm not sure what to do.
let me
Yeah,
just try this.
Okay.
All right, let's see if this works. Is it still getting reports of fuck. Wow, this is listening. Anyway, if there's anything that you can rant on for a minute, that would be cool.
See, this was my biggest fear. Like, Ethan's gonna have to go to me to just like punch everybody. I don't even know me.
I'm waiting on. I'm too high for this. I feel like you kind of so
and if you
power ahead.
Right?
I don't know, and for MJ to tell me. So I guess for now it'll just be weird. Sounds fine to me, but that doesn't really matter. If everyone else seems to be happy.
They're asking they're asking people are asking questions, which is fine.
You know, just exiting the stream and then coming, that might do something. But at this point, one of the only options we have. Studio, just hit that red X.
Sorry, what?
A studio, that red X. Use that same link that I emailed you to come back. And then let's.
Okay, you want me to exit?
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
Where is my red X? Where we are, there's like
there we go. Yep. Okay, I'll be right back.
There we go. All right. No idea what's going on, but this resolved itself. In the meantime, I've been very excited. Definitely have the in. We got almost an hour and a half in before our audio. Plenty of good conversation. That hopefully still more to come. So I'm hearing that's my end. Yeah, same thing. So cool. Maybe I'll just shut up the audio. Let's look at some pictures. All right, here you Zach.
Okay.
So I'll have to do 1 second.
Okay. Well, if you guys can still hear me, if you guys want to type questions, I will try and answer them.
All right. I hope this works.
There we go.
Is it?
Thank God.
Oh man. So all right, let's wait to see if people say whether or not the issue is fixed, and then we can get back to it. All right. Scott says it worked. let's see. I have, okay. My mom has confirmed with me that it's working. So back to our I forget what we were talking about. I think it was something about, were we still on the topic of what Gavin was doing with his own Pelly?
Oh yeah, about whether or not, yeah. So Gavin was, excellent memory. Yeah, so Gavin has been experimenting with leaving the males in longer and longer. And so he was reporting that he's seeing, he has these males that are normally super placid and never ever give him any grief at all. Their behavior totally changed. So
interesting. That makes sense.
So I would be super interested to leave the two of them together, and
yeah,
and see how it goes. I think that'd be cool.
So, and I know we had this conversation. I'll ask you again now live. I had observed that a number of times, actually every single time with the females that I had ovulate this year, that as soon as they ovulated, the male went into a shed cycle. Did your male? He did the same.
Yep. Exactly, just like you predicted.
That's
Bobby, the female.
What was this stage of this shed?
That is after the babies left the nest. So we can come to.
Oh, okay.
That's a dramatic point in the story. So we have to.
Got it. Well, we have
to talk about the babies, and then we can come back to that.
We will wait for the prop. Okay, but so you did see that with the male where she ovulated, and what was the proximity of ovulation to shed?
I think it was like 10-ish days, something like that. Okay. I mean, he went into shed immediately.
Right away. So she's like, so let's just, for the sake of everyone who's stuck through our technical difficulties and, wanted to hear the sunny conclusion. So the ovulation right here, was it like that day, the next day that the male was in shed?
I would have to look and see.
Yeah,
but basically, he just sort of retired. He just started doing his ecdysis behavior, so she's ovulating. He just starts hiding and goes into blue. So he didn't shed. He didn't shed immediately. He went into
the
cycle.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Got it. That definitely lines up with what I saw. All right. So now we are at the point of the story where she's been in the nest for a while. We're approaching that day. It was 79 is what you said.
Yeah.
And is that then when this image would come into play?
Yeah, that's after about a day or so.
Yeah. Okay.
But
wow, that is so damn cool.
Dude, it was, I mean, I get emotional even just looking at it. It was so amazing.
I could only imagine.
It was just amazing. And so the whole process from when when the baby started when I could see the first pips anyway, to when the last baby left the nest was about 3 days, something like that.
Okay.
And during that whole time, it's funny, like I went into this whole process thinking that the maternal incubation was like, that's the big ride. And I didn't actually really give that much thought. It's kind of surprising to me that I didn't, but I didn't give that much thought to like, what am I going to do when the babies start pipping?
Yeah.
And so then the few people that I talked to who had done it with mostly Morelia.
Okay.
But also the one person I found who had done it with scrubs, they all said the same thing. Like as soon as the baby started pipping, we pulled them out. And
what was the reasoning?
Everybody's always afraid that she's going to hurt them somehow. I know. Great big snake, little teeny snake, like she's going to squish them or she's going to.
If she's not going to hurt the eggs, how could she hurt a baby?
Well, so it was interesting. It took some faith in the process. I mean, there's a few people in the chat who can who will agree. There, I gave a few people access to the Nest Cam, and literally there were like 8 or 10 people who were pinging me throughout, like, "Oh my God, did you see what she just did?"
Awesome.
So she would, she did stuff that was actually a little bit, well, certainly surprising and a little bit scary. So the first, when they first started pipping and they would stick their noses out, she would let them do that for a while, and then she would just sort of lie on them, just smush them back into the egg. And I was like, okay. And then after, I have to go back and look, but I think after about 12 hours or so, this will all be in the paper when we write it up. But, after about 12 hours, say, the babies are getting a little bit more insistent about coming out of the net, out of the eggs, and she would just smack them like right in the face with a coil. I think I sent you 1 or 2 videos of it.
Yeah.
There's one where she whacks one with her tail. And it was really consistent. The first time she did it, I thought like, oh, okay, maybe she was just tickled and like she just sort of flinched. But no, it was super consistent. And she was really precise with, she would, with which one she wanted to hit, and that she wouldn't hit, she wouldn't use her whole body. She would just use like that one little bit of coil and just like, boing. And she would not let them leave the nest. And so they're gradually like, getting more and more bold about coming out of their eggs, and they would like come out an inch, and then they'd go back in, and then maybe eventually they're coming out like 6 inches, and then they would go all the way back in, or and she was really keeping them corralled, although gradually over time she gave them a little bit more rope as well. But it was a really deliberate process. So this is one of the things we're documenting in this paper, is the change over time in how she managed them. And I wish I knew what the point of that behavior was, because it's super deliberate. It's, is it that she wants to make sure that that everybody is out of their eggs before she lets anyone go? Is it something about building resiliency? Like, hey kids, the world's a tough place. Like, I have no idea. But she was really, really consistent with doing it, and it decreased over time. And eventually she started to let them out of the nest. But at first, no way.
You want me to give my 2 cents on it?
Please. Yeah, please.
So my initial first thought would be that it was her ensuring that they absorbed all of their yolk. I've noticed that, like, this year, I was back to incubating a little bit cooler than I had in the past couple of years. This is my 4th year hatching scrub pythons, and the first year I incubated cooler, full hatch rate, big babies. They all ate pretty much right off the bat. The second year I repeated the same thing, same female. I lost the whole clutch, but I think that was nothing to do with incubation. I got a little paranoid and bumped it back. I bumped it up the next year, and then the subsequent year following. I got smaller babies. They didn't feed quite as well. So this year dropped it back down. And this year I had the biggest babies I've had, super robust, full bellies out of the egg. But from those big babies, from the first pip until they exited the egg was 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
And I've seen before, you'll have someone take a video of their baby that's pipped, and then all of a sudden the baby just starts shooting out of the egg kind of unnaturally. Or like those retic people we all know that'll slice the whole egg open and then you just yank the snake out. And you'll have to cut umbilical cords and but
I hate that shit.
Yes, me as well. But to me, with the mom having that very deliberate behavior, that's what I would equate it to. Just very anecdotally, would be her. And what you said about she eventually would let up on it a couple days later after they had more of a time to fully absorb that yolk. That she's making sure that these babies, especially if they're feeling their siblings pushing on the egg from the side, they may have that physical stimulus that they get touched on the side. They want to go forward because that's just their natural defensive reaction to that. Mom says, "Get back in there. You need to reabsorb you need to absorb your yolk." That would be my guess, is that she's ensuring their yolk is fully absorbed.
That's super cool. I love that. That seems totally reasonable.
Especially the part that really made me think that was that she started letting up eventually, because I mean, like everything that you've described to me tonight and that we've talked about throughout the process, it all seems about as intentional as anything could get. So there's no reason why all of a sudden this last thing that's weird wouldn't be intentional as well.
Totally. Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
It's just, I mean, to me, this just adds so much more depth to the species that I already think is the most fascinating snake in the entire world. Like, as much as I love green tree pythons, I'm not, no way would I think a female green tree python would do the same thing. They'd be like, duh, my babies are hatching. But yeah, wow, that is so amazing. So once they did exit the egg, did they immediately exit the nest box, or did they find a corner to chill in? What was the moving pattern?
Some of them, it was interesting watching. Some of them were just like, there were two of them that kind of came out really close together at the very beginning.
Okay.
And they were just like, okay, you could really see Bobby was getting tired. Because she's basically been on 24/7 duty at this point. And so they just like made a break for it and like, okay, mom's not looking, we're out of here. Some of them, there was a variety in how they approached it. Some of them would hang out. There was one who kept going. Like, I couldn't believe that he was still even partly in the egg, because he was like stretched all the way across the nest, and then he would go back in the egg. So he just had like this tiny little bit still in the egg, but then he would go back in. So there was a wide variety with it. So like I was saying, you could see that she was getting really tired, and then once she had decided to, okay, I'm going to start letting him go, then she actually hung out for quite a while with just her head sticking out of the nest box, and the babies would kind of have to crawl over her head, and she would like watch them climb up into the foliage.
That's so cool.
Like, I mean, oh my God. But there was one left in the nest who had some deformities. Okay. And he tried, I'm saying he, I don't know, but he was missing an eye. That was what we could see on the nest cam.
Okay.
And there was a while during hatching where I was sure he was dead because he wasn't moving at all.
Yeah.
But he eventually did make it out of the egg, and then he stayed in the nest, and she stayed there with him for a full day after everybody else had left. And and he tried to leave, but he just didn't have it in him. And so finally she left the nest, and within like 10 minutes went into started shedding. So that's what that picture was for.
Oh, that.
And dude,
Yep.
I got choked up looking at it when it was happening. You know, she'd just gone through this incredible experience, like this incredible journey, right? And then she's done. And I just like,
Whoa.
just the, you know, I couldn't have asked for a more moving and just like like what an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't write like if you wrote it in a movie, you'd just be like, okay, well that's a little heavy-handed, but that's what she did.
So the babies were all out of the nest, and she immediately was like, all right, the skin's coming off.
Except for the one that she had to leave. Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Wow.
That's and then you know how so the standard procedure that I often hear people talk about is when they're when they've done the normal snake breeding thing and they're pulling a mom off of a pile of eggs. Standard procedure, right, is to, or common anyway, is to wash the mom, wash the enclosure, get rid of the smell of any of the stuff, because otherwise she's gonna be looking for these eggs and she's gonna be agitated and everything. I didn't do any of that.
I've never done that.
Okay, cool. She didn't go back, and I mean, she stuck her nose in the nest a couple of times, but she like hasn't shown any interest in it. I just left it in there, but she's not. She's not paying any attention to it at all. It was like, okay, now it's done.
Interesting. Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was an amazing experience. Like that's the thing I just keep coming back to over and over again. Just as a keeper, I just felt so privileged to basically have a front row seat to you know, just what a miraculous, incredible experience.
Yeah. That really is. Yeah, I've only ever maternally incubated ball pythons. And that was a lot of fun. In a much more simplistic type of setting. So how long did you leave the babies in the enclosure until you removed them?
Oh, I pulled them out as they left because that enclosure wasn't entirely baby proof.
Got it.
So,
okay. Got it.
Yeah. And then I put them in their own, they're just all cohabbed in a 4x2 for now, but I'm going to be dividing them up over several enclosures in the next week or so, something like that.
In the Alexandra strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
That, yeah, I mean, I really hope to be able to get her on here at some point to talk about all of her success, but yeah, I mean, that's like very atypical for snake breeding practices. I mean, I don't think I could do it, just considering I have so many other snakes and just like the amount of attention to detail you need to pay in that type of setting. I mean, she did it with great success, so I have no reason to think that it'll be any different for you. Have you started to get any sheds from them yet?
Nope. Several of them are in blue.
Okay.
But no sheds yet.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, they take a while. They, I mean, I have some that are 3.5 months old that not even remotely showing any signs. Yeah.
Wow.
I had a bar neck go 6 months 2 years ago without a shed.
How many meals did it take during that time? Do you know?
So that one actually none on its own volition at the time. I think that has a lot to do with it as well. That was one that I ended up having to force feed, and it bounced back, and it actually ended up being the best looking one out of the entire clutch. But yeah, I do think that has a lot to do with it as well. The straggler shedders are ones that don't take to food right away. but I almost always have them eat before their first shed. Rarely do I have them. Just on a function of how long they take to shed. I mean, if it was like green trees or carpets where that shed's coming within a couple of weeks, that's one thing. But yeah, I just, to me, like if I were to do this, which I definitely would like to, part of it would be I'd want to like leave those babies in the enclosure for a couple of weeks and just see what happens. I breed rattlesnakes as well, and rattlesnakes are well known as snakes maternal instinct, and even paternal instinct as well, where like the entire family will be sitting in like their basking spot, and I've taken a lot of my observations from those snakes and applied it to everything else, and I think it's really kind of expanded my understanding, and then also just curiosity as well, because with those snakes, you don't have much of a choice other than to observe some of that behavior because they're live bearing. But then with the python, that's all up to the keeper's discretion. But just based on, for me, it was just based on my understanding of how intelligent scrub pythons are, and now also hearing everything that you've observed, I have no reason to think that the next mind-blowing observation isn't the maternal instinct of that mother scrub with her newborn babies.
Well, I mean, for sure, she's completely clued into them.
Yeah.
Or she was during that time, right? Like, if you look up the behavioral definitions of maternal care, she was doing several of them, right? So I think that would be great. That was something that I would definitely change, is have them be born or have them hatch in a baby-proof enclosure, because I think that would be that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And why not?
One thing that I would just kind of brainstorming right now that I think would be a cool observation to try would be keep having all the babies in there, and then feed the mom with all the babies in the enclosure. Almost like teaching them how to, because a good friend of mine who breeds a lot of rattlesnakes, he'll do that sometimes with his litters, where he'll feed the mom or even both parents if they're both in there while the babies are in the enclosure. And anecdotally, just kind of like that was me testing to see if that would have any impact on the babies eating. And I think based on everything that you've observed, maybe that might also be the next thing that they would do. Who knows?
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic idea. I would love to do that. Yeah.
And it'd be even cool to see if some of the babies would eat in that big enclosure as well. Yeah, that's so cool.
They're not shy. I mean, I see them all the time.
Yeah. I don't doubt it at all. Tim wants to know if you're going to keep any of these babies and kind of track their progression as they grow.
I am, yeah. I mean, there's 14 surviving babies, so I'm not keeping. I'm definitely not keeping. Like, holy crap! I have 16 scrub pythons.
It happens quick.
Yeah, it does. Literally overnight. But no, I'm going to keep a couple. I hope, and then a number of them are going to friends of mine.
Okay.
And the idea is to basically stay in touch and see how they do. Yeah, I think it would be super fun.
Yeah, that's always, that's a struggle that I've kind of had mentally, doing this and at a bigger scale too with these snakes that like I care so deeply about, is being able to, keep track of them as they're growing. And I'm very fortunate where most people who have gotten scrub pythons from me are all the same kind of mentality, and kind of community mentality where, I could check in with anyone at any point in time and get a full rundown of how the snakes are doing. And, we'll get updated pictures and whatnot.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Really great. And I think that, I think the snakes can build the community and then benefit themselves kind of full circle. I think that having so many people kind of on the same wavelength does nothing but immensely benefit the lives of the snakes themselves functionally day to day.
I sure hope so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I sure hope so. I mean, you and I touched on it super briefly, but I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts about that as somebody who actually is producing a fair number of them. You look at the horror show that retics are, right? Like how many mainland retics are born every year, and how many of them are still alive after 5 years, let alone 25 years. And I worry about that with these guys. As people actually get the information that, oh wow, they're not like crazed killers, they're actually super cool. And so the two questions I have is like, how I think you said there were 14 litters in the US this year.
Yeah, I believe so. 14.
Do you think that is do you think that's a good size, a good rate of breeding for placing the animals in appropriate homes? And then also, like, I'm curious to know, like, what vetting do you do for buyers that you're selling to, or do you kind of rely on them to make their own decisions?
So I guess to address the first one, I think that it's definitely, there's multiple factors that kind of go into answering that question. Because, the demand for scrubs is higher than it has ever been, but that's obviously a proportionate number. I think that at least just from conversations with people, they're attracting a lot of keepers that like retics, berms, boa constrictors, carpet pythons, et cetera, who know what they're doing, have been keeping snakes for no decent period of time, or have the right kind of mindset. I think that the popularity within kind of scrub python people, so to speak, is like very intense, but within a limited group, that's steadily growing. But I think there's so many more people that would love scrub pythons and just aren't really aware of them yet, or still, or like they were aware of them on their ascent and learning about reptiles and developing their collections, and just got the typical, they're heat-seeking demons and they're terrible and they'll bite your face off every day and you'll hate keeping them. And like that was it. That was their only interaction with the thought of keeping scrub pythons, was hearing that from somebody who was misinformed and moving on with their day. So I think that obviously there's a limit to the market for scrub pythons based on they're not a first pet snake for the most part. I mean, I think Alexandra's told me that her first snake was a scrub python, but like that's
cool.
It's an outlier case.
Yes,
but doesn't mean that other people couldn't do that as well. And I don't recommend scrub pythons for first time keepers, so I'll put that out there. But I think the market is as big as the super dwarf retic market. They're very similar snakes, and without talking down to retics, I think that scrubs check every box that retics do, higher than retics do. And there's no room for deception with scrub pythons either, because we're not crossing species. We're not making 75% Tannenbar, Barneck, Moluccan, Xanthic, pet patternless,
Right.
And I don't think it's going to happen either. But I think there's so much to do with impure forms. I just don't think, I think the snakes wouldn't look good either, honestly. I think whatever I just said there looks so much worse than a Barneck. that it wouldn't even be worth it. But I think that it's also on all of us scrub aficionados to try to get the word out there to as many, worthy keepers as is possible. And not in like a salesy way, just in a, this is what we're doing and this is why we like it. And either, if you want to see what this is all about, here we are to give you all the information. And if not, okay, that's what this is all about, is, exploring something and seeing if it's something you want to dive deeper into. And if not, okay, it's not for everybody. So I guess to wrap up the first portion of that, I would say the scrub market has a lot of room for growth within reason, but use the retic market as kind of like a benchmark. And super dwarf cross, not the mainland retic market. I think a lot of people who do keep mainland retics would probably enjoy their, keeping a lot more if they were to do scrub pythons, just because a lot of headaches that you get with those big retics you don't get with scrub pythons. But then as far as vetting goes, I think for me, and I think luckily enough, kind of very grateful for this, I think I haven't sold one scrub python to a person who I shouldn't have. And I think the way that I have kind of gotten to that point is I really don't advertise directly. Obviously, I'm very active on social media, especially since now I'm doing this full time, where before, when I was not full time with snakes, I just didn't really have the time or honestly the want mentally to do it. We're in an attention-based world, and if you're not doing it, you're not being looked at, unfortunately. I often feel that I'm annoying people with how much I might pop up in their feed, but
not annoying me.
Well, good. I'm glad. But kind of my approach to that is that I want people to reach out to me looking for more information. Like, hey, I like these snakes that you post. What is there to know about them? To me, if someone is going out of their way to message anybody, me, someone else, a breeder, a keeper, whatever, who did not post an animal for sale, to inquire with maybe the eventual goal of acquiring an animal, but they're not responding to a MORPH market ad that had a price on it, and this is my shipping policy. The message isn't, would you take 1,600? It's, hey, I really like your scrub pythons. Can I ask you some questions about them? And I think just that mindset from the jump, kind of, to me, like, any worry about this person not being a good home is reduced by like 70%. Because that mindset is there of starting with an appreciation of the animal. They didn't react to a dollar sign, because obviously I sell scrub pythons, but you couldn't find a price publicly for them right now, at least. So they're going at it with no real expectation other than maybe like, okay, this is what the wild caught ones on MORPH market are going for. I assume captive bred will be this percentage higher. So they're not reacting to a dollar sign, or this is what I would make if I got this pair and in 3 years they breed and I have this many babies and I sell them for this much. It's just, these animals they're beautiful. I'm interested in them. Hey, his entire page is him holding these snakes without blood on his arm. And there's a bunch of them. It's not just one or two that keep reappearing over and over again. This isn't a trick. There are 100 of these things that are acting the same way. I think so. Kind of to take my long-winded answer and kind of bring it back together a little bit. I pretty intentionally kind of curated my presence online to attract the kind of customer that I think would be most suited for these snakes. And then hopefully whatever effect that can have on a wider community. Someone could see my posts, have an interest, and buy a snake from you.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't hurt me. That just benefits all of us. So, I'm not trying to convert to sales. I'm trying to convert to the people who are interested in the right way, and kind of promote this is how one should approach getting into a new project in their reptile collection. So, but then with that said, on a more practical standpoint, asking somebody what else they keep, what their experience is, what their setups are like, what this animal would be going into, and then just answering every and any question, not withholding information, not being stingy with time or not doing one word answers, being attentive and, to the best of my ability. So I think all of that kind of is how I approach this.
Yeah. Well, I seriously appreciate that you do that, both in how you run the business and the tone that you're taking as a leader in the scrub community. I think we've all really benefited from that in a big way. And just personally, you've been a super helpful mentor to me in thinking about all of this stuff. So I'm really grateful for that.
I've learned a lot too. This is definitely a two-way street. I've learned a ton from being able to be an observer of what you've done this year. It's and especially like some of the issues that we were talking about before the show went live that I've had with breeding that has made me kind of rethink some things, witnessing how you did it and others, helps me have a better understanding of my animals and where I may be making mistakes. So the information flow benefits all of us in every potential.
You're here. Absolutely.
Great. Well, I mean, we're definitely burning the midnight oil a little. Well, you're on.
It's easy for me. I'm on the West Coast, but
I'm complaining. I'm not that much further east of you. But I mean, do you think there's anything that we didn't touch on that's relevant?
I just had one little story from the hatching that I also thought, or another observation that I thought was super cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So another reason that I hear people talk about, maternal incubation is scary, or that maternal incubation, like things could go wrong, is what about if a baby is going to can't get out of its egg and it goes into an adjacent egg or whatever and drowns. I mean, I'm sure stuff like that happens, but what I observed, the egg that wound up being, that had the least access to anything else, so it was on the bottom of the pile. It was surrounded on all sides and above by eggs that were glued to it. So that baby, there was like maybe, I don't know, less than, it was like there was a spot that wasn't adhered to the other eggs that was maybe about the size of a dime.
Okay.
And that's where it cut out of its egg. And so it was able to tell from inside the egg where the safe spot to go was.
Yeah.
And that's where it went. And again, I was just like, these things are so, I mean, obviously there's a super high selection pressure for, can you get out of the egg, right? Evolution is selecting for that pretty hard. But the fact that what they're able to do just right, before they're even hatched is just amazing to me. I think that's just freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And it made me think, there's been a bunch of or some degree of papers and research on communication between reptile eggs, not so much with snakes, more with, I think it's mostly with crocodilians, but but to some degree with snakes, and mostly they look at coordinating hatching, or whether they're hatching in response to environmental stimulus. But regardless, there's some degree of communication, whatever that means, between these eggs. So it got me thinking that even if I weren't doing MI, I don't think I would pull the eggs apart before sticking them in an incubator. I think I would still leave them all together. Just because, again, like, it's how they're designed to work.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I was worried about happening didn't happen. So that was just really thought-provoking to me, just seeing how they were able to navigate that potential deadly hurdle, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think just kind of functionally thinking about it, it does make sense because, you know, snake eggs, but particularly scrub python eggs, you know, they give off, you know, they're outgassing heat towards the end of incubation. So if you're that snake and you have thermal sensing capabilities, you're going to see that little gap of no thermal recognition and just, oh, there it is.
Right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, the leaving eggs together versus separating them thing is one that I'm still back and forth on. Because I think obviously in a maternal incubation setting, obviously that's going to be how it goes. But then she was rotating around those eggs a little bit. I had a perfect clutch that had one egg go bad, and it was under a fair bit of pressure, but it was also sitting on a grate, so it had pressure from below as well. And I wonder if that's why that egg that was fertile, the rest of the eggs were good, went the distance. That's what happened with that one. I also had a mentor of mine he probably knows more about reptiles than anyone I've ever met. Tell me specifically that scrub python eggs are sensitive to contact with eggs in their clutch that have gone bad.
When you say sensitive, what do you mean sensitive?
Where a good egg that would hatch otherwise, that's like stuck to a dying egg, will therefore have something consequential happen to it. And I had a couple instances this year that anecdotally to me lend towards that being the truth, where I had one barnet clutch that had it was 9 eggs that had made it the distance, and around like day 75 one of the eggs just fully crashed out, you know, hard on the inside, slimy exterior, and I was worried about removing it because at that point they're so adhered to each other, and the rest of the eggs are dimpling. The baby and the egg next to it didn't make it. Can you equate one to the other? Not based off of just that alone, but it did happen. So I don't know. It's definitely something that I'm still undecided on from an artificial incubation standpoint. So I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear. I have no idea how common it is for people to leave them together, because
it's not very
generally. That's my sense.
Yeah. I mean, I did it this year and had success. I know Alexandra's generally done the same thing without concern. I think TJ Chambers also left his eggs together. So yeah, I think people have done it successfully. And I mean, I have too. My first clutch I left together, and they all hatched out. So, and that's what I was shooting to do this year, was leave clutches together as much as I could. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
no real conclusion to that, but definitely something that I'm still debating routinely. So
Yeah, I had one egg in my clutch that where sort of half of it did not look great, and it started to look bad maybe a week or two into the incubation, but it never got fully gnarly. It was just that end of it was gross looking, and
okay.
my assumption was always that's the one, the hatchling that had the problems probably came out of that one.
So that reminded me of a question that I meant to ask that we just kind of got away from. So you said that before you removed that water basin, that the eggs had started to get a little moldy, a little. What exactly? How did that mold manifest? Was it just kind of like a film on the outside, where like their little windows forming? How did that?
No, just little black specks.
Oh, okay. And the physical structure of the egg wasn't changing along with the.
No. It was and nothing fuzzy or anything like that. It was just
because in my experience, as soon as there's the first indication, that egg is not going to make it. But
the first indication of
any sort of like molding, or like I'll look in the incubator and I'll have the whole clutch, and one egg is slightly off colored compared to the rest of them, and I know within 3 days that egg is going to be fully green and blue and slimy. I'm
okay.
Okay, so but very much your experience was very different than mine as far as the functionality of that. And did that just go away once you had removed that water basin?
It didn't progress.
Okay, so it just evened out, stayed where it was.
Yeah, basically. So they just had little black specks of mold on them for their entire the entire time.
All right, interesting, cool. Yeah, I was definitely curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen similar pictures from other python eggs in the wild. So, and from a couple of other MI clutches, but and sometimes you see MI clutches where the eggs just look like, oh God, that's gnarly, and these never got to that. So
for sure. Yeah, I mean, with like the ball pythons that I maternally incubated, yeah, I mean, those eggs were mangled. they did not look like artificially incubated eggs. But for anyone who's watching, just by looking at the eggs in this picture, that looks like what they look like in the incubator to me. So
yeah, you can't see with those infrared pictures. You can't see the black spots that are on them.
Yeah, but I feel like you think of maternally incubated eggs, you think that shell would be some shade of brown and kind of wrinkly, and would look more wild than that. But to me, those eggs look totally normal.
I should have sent you a picture of what they look like after everybody was out. But yeah, they were a little bit discolored. They didn't look like those beautiful pearly whites from the that they were when they were freshly laid. But
sure. But not much.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, man, this was an incredible conversation. I mean, truly one of my favorite episodes I've done so far.
Well, thank you, man.
I'm very happy.
You've had a lot of amazing conversations on here, so
I know.
Nice company to be in.
So for anybody who wants to keep up on what you're doing on social media and whatnot, where can you be found?
I'm a stealthy guy. People are welcome to reach out to me on Facebook.
Okay.
Just Paul Duren. My profile picture is a scrub python head, so it's easy to tell. And I have an Instagram page, but I hardly ever post on it. I just use it for looking at other people's stuff. So Facebook is definitely the easiest place to find me.
Awesome. And I know you'll probably get some questions. Are any of these babies eventually going to be for public offering, or are you all doing this kind of friends and family?
It's mostly friends and family. I mean, if there are folks who are interested, I'm happy to talk to them. It's a little bit it's a little bit up in the air.
Sure.
But I'm totally happy to talk to people, and I'm happy to talk to people if people just have questions or anything like that as well. I mean, you can see I'm pretty enthusiastic about it, so be happy to talk anybody's ear off.
Oh yeah. Well, before we get out of here, I want to show these last two pictures that you sent me of these that we have not yet taken a look at. So that's 3 in that picture that we can see, or is that?
There's at least 3. There's the 2 of them that are lying with their heads close to each other, and then there's one behind it. Yeah, at least one behind it.
Yeah, that's very cool. And then this is definitely a good one, a good send-off picture.
Yeah. Yep. That's them, right? That's just how they are.
Oh yeah. That seems to be the case with most captive bred scrubs. This is what you're getting.
Yeah. I like isn't that amazing? I can see why people do. I can see why people really really get hooked on breeding snakes, because that was super fun.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's no better feeling than seeing baby scrub pythons, coming out of the egg and seeing them crawl around, have them crawl up your arm for the first time. It just everything comes full circle in that moment. It's hard to beat it. Yeah,
it's super cool.
Well, awesome, man. Well, again, thank you for your time tonight. This was an incredible conversation. I truly loved it.
Oh, my pleasure. I super enjoyed it. Really, totally enjoyed it.
Well, let me throw you backstage real quick if you want to stick around for a minute, and I'll close out the show. All right. Again, thank you so much, man. I hope you have a good night.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
All right. Wow, that I'm going to sleep well after this one, guys. That was an incredible conversation and very thought-provoking, and definitely makes me want to try maternally incubating scrub pythons. If you enjoyed this scrub python conversation tonight, please check out the Somalia group on Facebook. Both Paul and I are quite active in it. It's for keepers of all levels, anyone who's interested. Free-flowing knowledge about scrub pythons over there. So please check that out. For me, you can find me on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd, or just Stephen Kush on Facebook. That's where I do all my postings. For us here at the Trap Talk Reptile Network, please give us a subscribe on YouTube, like, share, all that good stuff. Spotify, Apple, all the audio platforms as well. We appreciate everybody for listening and watching. There's a new episode of a list of different podcasts every single day of the week here on the channel. So there is never a shortage of top tier reptile content for anyone who is looking for it. But with that said, that's it for this week. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and I'll catch you all back here next Wednesday.